Welcome to our channel, where we bring you the most spine-chilling tales and unsettling true stories. Today, we have a true story, The Mirror's Curse. Sit back, but not too comfortably, as we dive into this unnerving narrative. Lucy, an antique dealer with an unwavering passion for rare and unique finds, spent her days scouring the city for hidden gems among the cluttered attics and dusty basements of the city's older residences. Her reputation as a skilled and knowledgeable appraiser had spread far and wide, and she was often sought after for her expertise. Today, however, she found herself at an estate sale, rumored to contain a number of valuable antiques. The estate in question was an old, grand manor house that stood at the edge of town, its once elegant gardens now overgrown with weeds and vines. The sky hung low and gray, threatening rain, but that didn't deter Lucy in the slightest. She hurried up the creaky staircase to the second floor, where she found the room that had piqued her interest. A dusty, dimly lit study. The study was filled with all manner of books, scrolls, and paraphernalia related to the occult. In the center of the room stood a large, ornate mirror, its frame carved with intricate designs and adorned with faded gold leaf. Even from across the room, Lucy could feel a chill emanating from the mirror. It was as if it were watching her. She approached it cautiously, inspecting it for any signs of damage or wear. Despite its age, the mirror seemed to shine with a strange, unearthly radiance. The reflection within showed a pristine room, untouched by time and decay. Lucy's curiosity piqued. She made an offer to the estate's caretaker, a grim-faced man who seemed all too eager to be rid of the place. The next day, the mirror was delivered to Lucy's shop, and she immediately set about researching its history. Her search led her to the conclusion that the mirror had once belonged to a notorious occultist named Alistair Thorne, who had used it for dark rituals and summonings during the early 20th century. The mirror, she discovered, was a portal to another realm, a place where malevolent spirits and nightmarish creatures dwelled. For weeks, Lucy kept the mirror hidden away in the back of her shop, too frightened to display it for fear of attracting unwanted attention. But one day, she received a visit from her brother, Tom, who had recently returned from a long trip overseas. She told him about the mirror and its ominous history, and to her surprise, he didn't seem fazed. In fact, he was more intrigued than anything else. That night, as they sat in Lucy's shop after hours, Tom gazed into the mirror and gasped. In the reflection, he saw a figure standing behind them, its features obscured by shadows. Lucy turned around, but there was nobody there. Confused and alarmed, they continued to watch the mirror, waiting for something else to happen. Sure enough, as the hours passed, the reflections in the mirror began to change, twisting and warping until they showed scenes of unimaginable horror and violence. They saw figures with demonic features and glowing red eyes that didn't seem to belong to this world. The air in the room grew thick with a sense of foreboding, and both Lucy and Tom felt as if they were being watched. Lucy knew then that they had to find a way to stop whatever was happening, before it was too late. They delved deeper into the mirror's history, learning that all of its previous owners had met grisly fates, driven mad by the visions or found dead under mysterious circumstances. It was clear that they were dealing with something far more sinister than they could possibly comprehend. As the night wore on, the images in the mirror grew increasingly disturbing. Lucy and Tom could feel their sanity beginning to slip away, their grip on reality slipping. They knew they had to act, but they weren't sure what to do. They had stumbled upon a secret that had been hidden for decades, and now they were paying the price. The next morning, as the first rays of sunlight streamed through the shop's dusty windows, Lucy and Tom sat huddled together in the back room, trying to catch their breath. They had survived the night, but they knew that their ordeal was far from over. The mirror was still there, its sinister gaze fixed upon them, daring them to try and escape its grasp. They made a pact that day. They would find a way to destroy the mirror and rid the world of its malevolent influence once and for all. It would not be an easy task, but they had no choice. The fate of the world might very well depend on them. And so, Lucy and Tom began their quest to destroy the mirror, journeying deep into the heart of darkness, facing unimaginable terrors and horrors along the way. Along the way, they would learn that the mirror was just the beginning, and that there were forces at work in the world far older and more powerful than they could ever have imagined. But they were determined, and they would not rest until they had saved the world from the nightmares that lurked beyond the mirror's reflective surface. The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon as Lucy and Tom sat across from each other in the dimly lit living room of their ancestral home. The once cheerful room now felt cold and foreboding. a strange energy permeating every inch of the space. The ornate mirror that had started it all stood in the center of the room, its dark, ornate frame seeming to glow with an otherworldly light. "So, what do we know about this mirror's history?" Lucy asked, her voice shaking slightly. The historian said it belonged to an occultist named Samuel Blackwood, but there isn't much information about him. Tom nodded, his expression grim. "Yes, and from what we can gather, Blackwood was into some pretty dark stuff. He was rumored to have dabbled in necromancy and summoned demons. It's possible that this mirror was used as a tool for his rituals." They fell silent for a moment, contemplating the gravity of their situation. Lucy glanced nervously at the mirror, feeling as if eyes were watching her from within its depths. "Do you think we should try to destroy it?" she asked, her voice barely audible. The historian said that might be the only way to stop whatever's happening. Tom took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. "I don't know, sis. It's not like we can just smash it with a sledgehammer. We need to find a specific method to destroy it, or else we could make things worse." Determined to find answers, they spent the rest of the day poring over ancient tomes and scrolls, searching for any clues about how to end the curse that had been placed upon them. Finally, they stumbled upon an ancient manuscript that detailed a ritual that might be able to destroy the mirror and release the trapped spirits. The ritual was complex and chilling, requiring them to perform a series of arcane gestures and incantations while standing in a circle of salt around the mirror. As they read through the instructions, they couldn't help but feel a sense of dread creeping up on them. "Are you sure we should do this?" Tom asked, his voice trembling. "It could be dangerous." Lucy bit her lip, considering the risks. "We don't have a choice, Tom. If we don't do something, we'll never be safe again." She took a deep breath and steeled herself. "Besides, we owe it to our family to try and end this." Together, they gathered the necessary supplies: salt, candles, incense, and a book of protective runes. As they prepared for the ritual, the air in the room grew thick with tension and anticipation. The mirror seemed to pulse with an ominous energy, as if it were aware of their intentions. Finally, they stood before the mirror, their hands trembling as they lit the candles and arranged the salt around them. Lucy took the book of runes and began to chant the ancient words, her voice barely audible above the sound of her own heartbeat. As they completed each step of the ritual, the air grew colder and the shadows in the room seemed to dance with malevolent intent. When they reached the final step, Tom drew a circle around the mirror with a dagger, allowing a single drop of his blood to fall onto the mirror's surface. Immediately, the room was filled with a blinding light, and the mirror shattered into 1,000 pieces, sending shards of glass flying through the air. The energy that had been emanating from it dissipated, leaving the room feeling almost peaceful in comparison. For a moment, they dared to hope that they had succeeded, but as the dust began to settle, they heard a whispering, like the rustling of leaves in the wind. The shards of glass began to move on their own, sliding across the floor and reassembling themselves into the shape of a figure that had been trapped in the mirror all along. The spirit turned to face them, its features twisted into a mask of anger and betrayal. "You foolish children," it hissed. "You have no idea what you have unleashed." Before they could react, the spirit vanished, leaving nothing but the unsettling feeling that their nightmare was far from over. The next few days passed in a blur of confusion and fear. Strange occurrences plagued the house, with doors slamming shut on their own and cold spots appearing in the night. Tom and Lucy tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy, but they could feel the weight of their actions pressing down upon them like a leaden cloak. Finally, unable to take it anymore, they decided to seek help from an expert in the supernatural. They drove to a nearby university town and found a professor who specialized in the study of occult practices. After hearing their story, the professor looked at them with a grave expression. "I'm afraid you've unleashed something far more powerful than you could have ever imagined," he told them. The figure that escaped from the mirror was likely one of Blackwood's most powerful servants. It will be difficult, if not impossible, to stop it on your own. He went on to explain that they would need to perform a series of complex rituals to banish the servant back to the spirit realm, and that they would likely need the help of other practitioners to succeed. The prospect of involving more people in their situation filled them with dread, but they knew they had no choice. They had to try. With the professor's guidance, they began the long and arduous process of preparing for the ritual. They spent countless hours researching, gathering supplies, and practicing the necessary incantations. As the days turned into weeks, they grew closer as siblings, their bond strengthened by the shared burden of their secret. Finally, The day of the ritual dawned. They gathered at the site the professor had chosen deep in the woods, surrounded by standing stones and ancient trees. The air was thick with anticipation and fear as they completed the final preparations. When everything was ready, they stood before the circle of standing stones, their hands clasped tightly together. The professor began to chant the ancient words, his voice echoing through the forest, calling forth the power of the spirits. As he continued, the air around them shimmered with an unearthly energy, and the trees seemed to bend their branches in reverence. When the final word was spoken, a blinding light filled the clearing, and a figure materialized before them. It was the servant they had freed from the mirror, its features twisted into a mask of anger and betrayal. "You have dared to summon me," it growled, "and now you shall pay the price." Before they could react, it lunged toward them, its icy hands reaching for their throats. They struggled against its inhuman strength, but it was no use. They were powerless to stop it. As they lay dying, Lucy felt a surge of love and determination welling up inside her. She looked into the servant's eyes and saw not the monster that it had become, but the lost and tormented soul that it once was. With her last breath, she whispered a single word, "Forgive." The servant froze, its hand hovering inches from their throats. For a moment, there was silence, and then a tear trickled down its cheek. Slowly, it released them, stepping back with a shaking head. "You are foolish, mortal," it whispered, "but your heart is pure. I can do nothing against you." With that, the servant turned and disappeared, leaving them alone in the clearing. As they lay there, exhausted and battered, they looked into each other's eyes and knew that they had won. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, but at a great cost. Together, they gathered their strength and rose to their feet. The sun was beginning to set, bathing the forest in a warm, golden light. They took each other's hands and walked away from the clearing, leaving the spirits of the woods to watch over them as they began the long journey back to their lives, forever changed by the events that had transpired. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an eerie glow over the ancient estate, Lucy and Tom stood before the massive ornate mirror in the dilapidated study. The air was thick with anticipation and fear as they prepared to perform the ancient ritual that would either free the trapped souls within the mirror or destroy it forever. The historian and the occult expert stood beside them, their hands trembling as they clutched the ancient artifacts and scrolls that had been painstakingly translated over the past few days. "Are you sure about this?" Tom asked his sister, his voice barely audible over the thundering of his heart. "What if we're making a mistake?" Lucy swallowed hard, her eyes never leaving the mirror. "We have no choice, Tom. We have to try." She glanced at the historian, who nodded grimly. "The ritual has been performed before, under similar circumstances. It worked then, and it will work now." The occult expert cleared his throat, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. "If you are ready, we shall begin." They all nodded, their hearts racing as they followed the expert's instructions. They lit the candles arrayed around the mirror, casting flickering shadows across the walls and ceiling. The historian began to recite the ancient incantation, his words echoing through the room like the whispers of the dead. As they continued, the mirror began to glow with an unearthly light, bathing the room in a hellish red hue. The entities within the mirror seemed to writhe and twist, struggling against the confines of their prison. The air grew thick with the scent of burning sulfur, and the floor shook violently, sending books and knickknacks tumbling to the ground. "We must be careful," the historian warned. "The mirror's defenses are weakening, but it is still fighting back." The occult expert nodded in agreement, his eyes locked on the mirror's surface as he watched the swirling patterns of energy that now danced within its depths. As they continued with the ritual, the mirror's glow intensified, until it was all but impossible to look directly at it. The entities within seemed to grow more desperate, their cries of anguish filling the room like the wails of the damned. Lucy and Tom exchanged frightened glances, but they forced themselves to remain steady, focusing on the task at hand. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the mirror's glow began to dim, and the energy within it began to dissipate. The entities within were released, their tortured spirits flying free into the night. The room fell silent, the air heavy with the weight of their shared relief. The historian let out a shaky breath, his hands trembling as he placed the last of the artifacts on the floor. "It is done," he said hoarsely. "The mirror has been destroyed and the spirits have been set free." Lucy and Tom exhaled in unison, their shoulders slumping as the weight of the ritual's demands finally lifted from them. But as they turned to leave the study, a chill ran down their spines. They knew that the battle they had just fought was only the beginning. The forces they had unleashed would have far-reaching consequences, and they would need to be prepared for whatever came next. As they made their way back to the main hall, their footsteps echoing through the darkened corridors, they couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment, tempered by the knowledge that their journey had only just begun. The fate of the world now rested on their shoulders, and they knew that they would have to be vigilant, resourceful, and above all, united if they were to prevail against the darkness that threatened to consume them all. The air in the room felt thick with anticipation and fear as Lucy and Tom stood before the ancient mirror. They had successfully managed to communicate with the trapped souls through the runes etched into the mirror's back. The spirits, once violent and menacing, now sounded desperate and pleading. They explained that they had been tricked into entering the mirror by an evil occultist centuries ago, and were now trapped in a terrible limbo. In order to set them free, Lucy and Tom had to find their physical remains and burn them in a sacred fire. The search for the spirit's remains would be no easy task. The mirror had belonged to several owners since the occultist's time, each of whom had moved it from place to place, obscuring any trace of its original location. But Lucy and Tom were determined to help the spirits find peace, even if it meant risking their own lives once more. They began by researching the mirror's history further, poring over ancient documents and maps in an attempt to piece together its whereabouts over the years. It was a daunting task, as the mirror seemed to have been passed down through secretive circles of occultists and wealthy collectors who were careful to keep its true nature hidden. But after days of relentless investigation, they finally uncovered a series of clues that led them to believe they were close to finding the mirror's resting place. The trail led them to an abandoned mansion deep in the heart of the woods. The house had once been grand, but now it was overgrown with vines and covered in a thick layer of dust and cobwebs. As they ventured inside, they felt a chill run down their spines. The air was thick with an unsettling sense of foreboding, as if the very foundations of the building were alive with malevolent energy. They explored the mansion room by room, searching for any signs of the spirit's remains. In one dusty corner, they found an old trunk that seemed to be overflowing with strange artifacts and arcane texts. In another, they discovered a hidden chamber concealed behind a sliding bookcase. The chamber was filled with strange devices and unsettling statues, all hinting at the dark rituals that had once taken place within these walls. Finally, after hours of searching, they found a hidden basement that seemed to be the source of the unsettling whispers and shadows that had plagued them since their arrival. In the center of the room, they saw a large, ornate sarcophagus resting on a pedestal. The sarcophagus was covered in ancient runes and adorned with symbols that they recognized from their research. They knew immediately that this was the resting place of the spirits they had been seeking. With trembling hands, they pried open the sarcophagus. Inside, they found the remains of several individuals, each dressed in the same style of robes and adorned with the same symbols as the mirror. Carefully, they gathered up the remains and placed them in a wooden box, which they then carried outside to a nearby clearing. There, they built a massive bonfire and placed the box of remains atop the flames. As the fire consumed the box, the spirits' cries of anguish and despair filled the air. Lucy and Tom watched in awe as the flames danced around the box, growing brighter and more intense with each passing moment. When the fire finally died down, they were left with a sense of profound peace and satisfaction. The mirror's curse had been lifted, and the trapped souls had finally found their rest. Their ordeal was far from over, however. The mirror still needed to be destroyed, and there were sure to be others who sought to harness its power for their own nefarious purposes. But for now, they could rest easy knowing that they had done what they could to set things right. As they turned to leave the clearing, they caught one final glimpse of the mirror, now nothing more than a pile of glowing embers scattered across the ground. It was a small victory, but it felt like a step in the right direction. Perhaps, they thought, there was hope for the world yet. The discovery of the hidden chamber beneath the floorboards sent a chill down Lucy's spine. It was as if they had stepped into the very heart of the occultist's lair. The room was small, windowless, and filled with the musty scent of long-forgotten secrets. Along the walls were shelves lined with ancient books, scrolls, and strange artifacts. In the center of the room stood a large wooden altar, its surface adorned with candles, human bones, and other disturbing paraphernalia. Lucy and Tom began to search through the items carefully, careful not to touch anything that seemed particularly dangerous or ritualistic. They soon found a small urn nestled in the corner of the altar, its surface etched with intricate runic symbols. "I think this is it," Lucy whispered, her voice trembling with fear. "This urn might contain the remains of one of the victims." They took the urn back to the study, where they could examine it more closely. Using the historian's knowledge and the expert's experience with occult artifacts, they were able to determine that the urn likely held the ashes of the occultist's most trusted assistant, who had been sacrificed in a particularly gruesome ritual. "We must burn these remains in the sacred fire we created earlier," the expert explained, "in order to free the spirits trapped in the mirror and put an end to this curse." Lucy and Tom gathered their supplies and returned to the basement, where they had built the fire pit earlier. The fire crackled and spat as they carefully placed the urn on the coals. As the heat began to build, the air around them grew thick with an eerie, otherworldly energy. The historian, who had been studying the ancient runes etched into the back of the mirror, murmured something under his breath, his voice barely audible over the roar of the flames. Time seemed to slow as they waited for the urn to melt. The shadows cast by the flickering fire danced across the walls, creating strange, distorted shapes that seemed to move and twist like living things. The whispers from the mirror grew louder and more desperate, as if the trapped spirits were begging to be set free. Finally, with a hiss of escaping steam, the urn shattered, sending a cloud of gray ash billowing into the air. The three of them watched in awe as the ash was carried away by the wind, vanishing into the night sky. The energy in the room seemed to dissipate, and the whispers from the mirror grew fainter and more distant. "It's over," the expert breathed, her voice hoarse with relief. "The curse has been broken, and the spirits have been set free." As they left the basement and emerged into the quiet, peaceful night, they couldn't help but feel a sense of profound loss and sadness for the countless lives that had been taken in the name of dark magic and twisted ambition. But they also felt a sense of closure, and the knowledge that they had done what was necessary to protect the world from the evils that lurked within the mirror. In the weeks that followed, Lucy and Tom closed up the house and put it on the market. They decided to move on with their lives, taking with them the lessons they had learned and the memories they would never forget. They knew that the world was still a dangerous place, but they had found a way to face that danger head-on and emerged victorious. And though the shadows might always lurk in the corners of their minds, they could now face them with courage and determination, secure in the knowledge that they had survived the darkest of nights. The air crackles with energy as Lucy and Tom recite the ancient incantations, their voices trembling with exhaustion and fear. Around them, the mirror pulses with an unnatural light, casting eerie shadows across the room. The historian and the occult expert stand back, their eyes wide with awe and terror, as they witness the unfolding events. Finally, with a deafening crack, the mirror shatters into a million fragments. A blinding light fills the room, forcing everyone to shield their eyes. When the dust settles, the house is silent once more. The malevolent entities that had been haunting them for days have vanished, and with them, the curse that had plagued the mirror's previous owners. Lucy and Tom staggered to their feet, covered in glass shards and dust. They look at each other, their faces etched with relief and exhaustion. The historian and the occult expert exchange glances, their expressions a mix of awe and disbelief. "That was incredible," the historian whispers. "I can't believe we actually did it." "Let's get this mess cleaned up," Tom says, gesturing at the broken pieces of mirror scattered across the floor. They begin to pick up the shards, carefully disposing of them in black garbage bags. As they work, they find a small, hidden compartment at the back of the mirror frame. Inside, they discover a key. "What do you think this is for?" Lucy asks, holding up the key. "I'm not sure, but let's find out," Tom replies. They search the room, but find nothing else of interest. Finally, they decide to investigate further by going to the bank and using the key to access the safe deposit box. At the bank, they are greeted by the same teller who had helped them purchase the mirror in the first place. "Hello, Lucy and Tom," she says with a knowing smile. "I'm glad to see that you finally managed to solve the mystery of the mirror." They exchange pleasantries before the teller leads them to a private room to access the safe deposit box. Inside the box, they find a scroll, its aged parchment covered in strange symbols and writings in an ancient language they don't recognize. "This must be what the key is for," Tom says, handing the scroll to the historian. "Can you translate this for us?" The historian takes the scroll carefully, her eyes darting across the strange symbols. After a few moments, she looks up, a concerned expression on her face. This is not good news. The scroll warns of the mirror's true purpose and the danger it poses if it falls into the wrong hands. Lucy and Tom exchange worried glances. "What do we do now?" Lucy asks. The historian sighs heavily. "We need to find a secure location to store the scroll, somewhere where it can't be found by those who might use its knowledge for evil purposes. And we must be vigilant, always remembering the lesson we've learned from this experience. They take the scroll and the key, promising the teller they'll return them when they're no longer needed. As they leave the bank, a sense of unease settles over them. The battle might be over, but they know that the threat of the mirror still lingers, waiting for the opportunity to wreak havoc once more. They decide to keep the scroll and the key with them, carrying the burden of knowledge and responsibility as they return home. There, they begin the long process of repairing their lives and moving on from the nightmare that had been the mirror. But they will never forget what they've seen and experienced, and they vow to remain vigilant against the darkness that lurks just beyond the veil of reality. As Lucy and Tom translate the scroll, their hearts race with the weight of the knowledge it holds. They discovered that the mirror wasn't an accidental portal, but a deliberate creation by an ancient civilization to contain a powerful entity known as the mirror's shadow. The scroll warns that if the mirror were to fall into the wrong hands, the shadow could be released, bringing untold suffering to the world. They feel a sense of responsibility to protect it from those who might misuse its power. Determined to keep the mirror safe, they decide to hide it away in a secure location. They begin by researching the history of the mirror, scouring old books and scrolls for any information that could help them determine where it might have originated from. After weeks of searching, they stumble upon a passage in an ancient tome that mentions a long-lost city hidden deep within the mountains, where the mirror was forged by the hands of its creators. Intrigued, they embark on a journey to find this city, hoping that it might hold the key to keeping the mirror hidden. Along the way, they encounter numerous obstacles and dangers, from treacherous terrain and hostile locals to supernatural beings that guard the city's secrets. But they persevere, driven by their sense of duty and the weight of what they've discovered. Finally, after months of travel and hardship, they find the long-lost city. It lies hidden behind a series of elaborate traps and illusions, designed to keep out those who are not worthy of its secrets. They manage to navigate these defenses with the help of the knowledge they gained from the scroll and the ancient runes etched into the mirror's frame. Upon entering the city, they are greeted by a sight that takes their breath away. A vast, ornate temple, built specifically to house the mirror and the mirror's shadow it contains. The temple is guarded by an order of monks who have sworn to protect the mirror from those who would misuse its power. Lucy and Tom are granted an audience with the high priest, who listens to their story and commends them for their dedication. The priest reveals that the temple has been prepared for this day, and that there is a hidden chamber within its walls where the mirror can be kept safe. He also provides them with a set of instructions on how to care for the mirror and maintain its power, ensuring that it remains a beacon of hope against the darkness it was created to contain. With the mirror securely hidden, Lucy and Tom return to their lives, forever changed by the weight of the responsibility they now carry. They vow to keep the mirror's existence a secret, knowing that the fate of the world rests upon their shoulders. And as they go about their daily lives, they can't help but feel a sense of awe and reverence for the ancient civilization that created the mirror and the shadow it contains. Understanding now that their actions are not just the stuff of legend, but rather the key to preserving the balance of power between light and darkness. Lucy and Tom knew that their discovery of the mirror's shadow and their successful battle against it was only the beginning. They realized that the mirror they had destroyed was only one of many such portals scattered throughout the world, each containing a fragment of the shadow's essence. It was only a matter of time before someone else stumbled upon one of these mirrors and unleashed the same horrors upon an unsuspecting populace. They decided that the best course of action was to create a secret society dedicated to the study and protection of these mirrors, and to prevent them from falling into the wrong hands. They approached the historian, the occult expert, and the language expert, who had all played crucial roles in their previous adventure. To their surprise, each of them agreed to join their cause, seeing the gravity of the situation and recognizing the importance of their mission. Together, they began to formulate plans for a hidden lair where they could study the mirrors and safeguard them from those who would use them for evil. Their search for a suitable location led them to an abandoned subterranean quarry beneath the city. The complex network of tunnels and chambers provided ample space for their growing collection of mirrors, as well as a secure location to study them. After weeks of meticulous planning and preparation, they began the painstaking task of transforming the cavern into a state-of-the-art research facility and museum. The entrance to the lair was hidden behind a false bookshelf in the historian's study. A secret compartment in one of the books revealed a small, hidden lever that, when pulled, revealed a hidden door leading to a winding staircase descending into the darkness. At the bottom of the stairs, a heavy metal door barred the way, secured by a complex combination lock and retinal scanner. Once inside, the members of the society were greeted by a dimly lit cavernous chamber, its walls lined with rows of glowing crystal orbs, each housing a mirror within a protective glass case. The center of the chamber was dominated by a massive obsidian altar, upon which rested a single, ornately carved obsidian pedestal. The pedestal was empty, waiting for the next mirror they would recover. A network of passageways and chambers branched off from the main room, each dedicated to a different aspect of their research. The historian's chamber was filled with books and scrolls detailing the history of the mirrors and their creators. The occult expert's lair was adorned with arcane symbols and tools of the trade, where she studied the dark arts and devised new ways to protect the mirrors from those who would misuse them. The language expert's quarters were lined with shelves of ancient texts, containing translations of long-lost texts and scrolls that held the key to understanding the mirror's shadow and its intentions. The heart of the lair, however, was the observatory, where they could monitor the activity within each mirror and gauge the strength of the shadow's influence upon the world. The observatory was manned around the clock by a rotating shift of watchers, each of whom spent their time studying the readings from the various mirrors and maintaining the delicate balance of power within the lair. As their collection of mirrors grew, so did their influence and reputation. Word spread throughout the underworld of scholars and adventurers who sought their help in dealing with rogue mirrors and the creatures they summoned. Their lair became a beacon of hope in a world increasingly threatened by the encroaching darkness, and a symbol of the power of knowledge and cooperation in the face of overwhelming evil. But even as they fought to protect the world from the mirror's shadow, they knew that their own efforts were only a temporary solution. Eventually, they would need to find a way to permanently seal the portals and contain the shadow once and for all. The key to that lay in the mysterious artifact they had recovered from the mirror's shadow itself, a shard of obsidian that seemed to resonate with the very essence of the shadow. They knew that the only way to destroy the shadow was to use the shard against it. But to do that, they would need to find the source of its power, the heart of the mirror's shadow. And that quest would take them to places darker and more dangerous than any of them had ever imagined. Thank you so much for joining me on this cinematic journey. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. Have you experienced a spine-chilling horror that left you trembling? Share your terrifying tale with us by emailing nightmarenetwork@hotmail.com, and we'd be thrilled to feature it on our platform. Until next time, happy movie watching.